he's actually supposed to be going to the funeral of a relative that has passed away. But on his way to the wake, he just starts begging his parents to let him go to this carnival instead. And so, for whatever reason, his dad decides to let him. So he lets him out of the car. He lets him go to this carnival. And he goes to visit Mr. Electrico. So, Mr. Electrico is kind of a weird guy. We don't know a whole lot about him, but what we do know about him is what Ray Bradbury has told us. And he says that Mr. Electrico tells Ray, as a 12-year-old kid, that he knows him already, that he was the soul of this long-lost friend of his. And he told Ray Bradbury that he was going to live forever. So this excited a 12-year-old Bradbury. He was already very much into the idea of magic and magicians. And so he decided that he had this sort of past that he's basing on Mr. Electrico, telling him that he is this long lost soul of a friend, and this future that he is now determined that he can live forever. So a few days after that, he begins writing and taking it very seriously as a writer. And he wrote every single day of his life after that. He later said about that incident that if I could teach everyone to get out of bed someday and look as I looked when I was 12 on the fuzz on the back of my hand, and I said, I'm alive. Why didn't somebody tell me? So I would tell every person to really know you're alive as a gift. That would really be the most important thing in my life or anyone else's. So he continues to write every single day of his life. In the mid-30s, his family moves to California, and he is, continuing to write. And his teachers really start to recognize that he has this unique writing ability, and they become an inspirational force, recommending that he, try to become a writer. And so he does that. He starts to write for magazines, and he joins these local science fiction clubs and his school's poetry club, some different things like that. After he graduates from high school, he is continuing to write, and his first publications are in 1938 and 1939. They were short stories he printed in his very own fan magazine, science fiction fan magazine. It was called Futuria Fantasia. Obviously wasn't paid for his work because it was his own magazine. But in 1941, he has a story called The Pendulum that is actually published in a magazine, Super Science Stories. And it sort of explodes, and everybody's very excited about it. And so by 1943, just 2 years later, he is writing full-time, and that's his job. His short story, The Big Black and White Game, was chosen in 1945 for Best American Short Stories, which is an anthology that's published every single year since 1915. His short stories would make it to this list again in 1946, 1948, and 1952. He goes on to lead a fairly normal life for somebody writing in a very unique field. He marries, he has 4 kids. He releases his first collection of short stories called Dark Carnival in 1947. He releases The Martian Chronicles, which is another series of short stories that explores sort of all these sort of political and social questions of nuclear war and the threat of foreign political powers that were very much on the minds of Americans during this time in the 1950s. Another one of Ray Bradbury's works, which is really well known and maybe one you may have heard or even have read already, is Fahrenheit 451. So this is published in 1953 in Galaxy Science Fiction magazine. It was actually originally called The Fireman. According to Bradbury directly. He got his inspiration for the book by an incident that happened in where he was living in Los Angeles around in like 1949, 1950. He and a friend were stopped and questioned by police for no apparent reason. So this is something that still we hear about today. That was a time in America where there was this really great sort of paranoia. It was a period of a lot of censorship and accusations of what were perceived as anti-American activities. And that really inspired him to write Fahrenheit 451.